This podcast is for entertainment and storytelling purposes only and is not a substitute for professional advice. Some topics may be sensitive. Please listen with care and seek support if needed.
Hi, I'm Crystal Park. Welcome to Season 2 of the Because She's Adopted podcast. Welcome, Alana.
Thank you.
So Alana and I met through our kids, didn't we?
Yes, I think so. Way back when.
Yeah, and so we've known each other for some time. We've been travel buddies.
Yes.
Our last trip was to Seattle where we saw Cyndi Lauper.
Not to date ourselves, but yes, it was awesome.
Yeah, and girls did just want to have fun.
Yes, totally.
When we were there. Yes, it was great. So today we want to discuss how trauma can manifest itself as physical pain,
ailments, symptoms,
sickness. And that was what your book is essentially about. But before we get into that, can you just share a little bit about what your personal journey looked like that inspired you to write your book?
Yeah, sure. And I mean, thank you for bringing me on to share. I think it kind of stems back to when, I've been always passionate about health, and I've been a naturopath for a long time, as you mentioned, close to 20 years. And it really became personal for me with the birth of my daughter, my first daughter. And at the time, I think if I do write about it a little bit in my book, though it's not about me, it's just kind of a story I share. That again, if we look at how trauma affects the body and kind of where that shows up, of course, at the time I was a new mom. I didn't understand or even know what, personally that, would define as trauma. Sometimes we don't know until we're in it or through it or in hindsight. But I had a pretty traumatic labor. So I had a 34-hour labor, and being a self-proclaimed perfectionist at the time, I would have said, that was just hard, but I need to just push through. And I mean, it was, I actually just talked about this the other day when I don't think about it very often, but the experience of it was literally out of body. Like there was a point where my body was not even present. I was not present with my body. And I was, just in a process of just get through it. And it basically turned out that nothing manifested the way I'd wanted to. I did still have a vaginal birth, but at the end of the day, I was left pretty torn, physically and emotionally. It took me 3 weeks to leave the house, 6 weeks to nurse without pain, and I only took 3 months off before I went back to work. So the whole experience, I just thought, that was grueling, that was hard. Not sure I ever want to do that again. But it wasn't actually until about 3 months after my daughter, or 2 months after, when I woke up with my arm numb, that I was like, there's something going on. And not even necessarily at that point. I just thought, I slept funny and my arm was up and, it's the feeling's not coming back. But after months and months of that not going away and doing a lot of seeking and a lot of digging and probably a good year of, I talk about a lot of these things that I did, and just in terms of root causes, I looked at my nutrition. I looked at nutrients and infections and all the things that, in my story that kind of contributed. But it took me a while to actually recognize that it was actually the trauma that was the catalyst. So if you understand, MS is a neurological disorder that creates numbness. And for me, it was like I had numbed myself to the reality of my circumstances. I had just, head down, pushed through. I didn't acknowledge the pain. I didn't acknowledge how hard that was. I really didn't give myself a break. I mean, of course, when you have a new baby and you're just, you got to be a mom, my needs became last, and not because they had to be, but because that's what I was manifesting and creating, because I thought that's what I had to do. So it wasn't until I started really digging and searching and trying to figure out, what is this connection? What am I maybe not acknowledging? And recognizing, it was kind of the first time that, I think it was a book by Gabor Mate that talked about when the body says no. And it was the first time that I recognized that trauma could initiate disease. And when I really started looking at that, being, wow, maybe that birth was traumatic for me, which just kind of started a whole journey. And it took me, that's now 15 years ago. And obviously the book is about the courageous cure. So recognizing that if we can get to those root causes, we can find healing for ourselves. And so, my story is that going through that, I've now had a second daughter, healthy, quick labor, very different experience, and I don't have MS. And so that was a big process, I think, for me. We all go through our stuff, but it just opened a door of understanding of how health actually looks and the layers that we have to go to find our true healing. And I often say, if people haven't found healing, it's not because they can't, they just haven't reached the right level yet. And so, I'm a human just like anyone else. And so that obviously was relevant for me, but I see it time and time again in my practice, being willing to ask those questions and have hard conversations to kind of open up people's perspective to maybe look deeper when they're not, getting the answers that they're looking for. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's so funny because we've known each other for so long, and I don't ever recall us talking much about your MS diagnosis. And from my understanding, you were diagnosed, you went to town, just trying to heal yourself, and you were away when you got the news.
Yeah. And actually found out that I was pregnant with my daughter. So when I first got the news, obviously that's when I was like, I don't know if I can have kids again. I don't know if it was such an emotional experience that the idea of going through that again, like most people, when they think about trauma, it's like, there's no way I can do that. I'm not sure I can have any more children. Not only because I was afraid of labor, but I was also afraid of what that would do. Would that make it worse? Would I, if I did, go into remission, would it bring it back? And I don't talk about it much anymore because it's such, it's just part of my story, but it doesn't define me. And I know that when I mention it, people are always like, oh, what do you mean? Like, you don't heal MS, right? We always look at these labels as something indefinite and often like a death sentence. But I look at health as your body's symptoms is its way of trying to communicate, and it's trying to tell you something. And if we understand that our body is our best friend, then it's actually doing that for a purpose. And I think if we debate reasons, we could be here forever. But if we look at purpose, like what am I meant to learn from that? And I'm willing to learn it, then that symptom doesn't need to be there anymore. So yeah, I don't necessarily talk about it. And when I kind of got the confirmation that, there was not only, did I not have MS, but it looked like there was healing in areas that previously had shown lesions in my MRI, was after I had done a lot of that work. And it was when I had actually found out I was pregnant with my second. And at that point I knew in my heart and soul that I had healed, but obviously getting that confirmation, like I'm human just like anyone else, right? I really wanted to see that confirmation. And like I said, that's now been, I guess, 13 years from that point. And so I know again, I've seen it in my own life, but I see it in my patients all the time who recover and who heal. And our body's just so miraculous. I mean, that's what God made us to be able to heal. That's its design. It's not designed to be ill. It's designed to heal. You get a cold or flu, it doesn't, you don't stay sick, right? Your body wants to heal. And that's in everything. So really then it's about trying to understand and uncover those roots. And the more I've been at this, the longer that I've been practicing, the more I see that we really do have to look at that mind-body connection, and understand our perspectives and how that's affecting why the body is manifesting whatever symptom they're manifesting. I don't think the body ever, like I said, just randomly chooses something. Like I said, for me, the numbness was because I was numbing myself from the reality of what I was experiencing. I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to feel it. And for someone else, it might be, if it's a skin issue, maybe it's around, if you think about skin's for, it's around touch, right? I don't, either I'm having touch I don't want, or I'm not getting touch I want to have. If it's something to do with the eyes, I'm seeing something I don't want to see, or I'm not seeing something I want to see, some level of conflict. So I always think of the body as like a metaphor. So that's kind of how I start looking at some of those deeper roots to kind of maybe open people's eyes up to some of the different perspectives.
So when you look at something like trauma, and how would you define that? And my understanding is that trauma can manifest itself as sickness or disease, right? That's what you're saying?
Yeah.
So how do you define trauma?
So, trauma is pretty broad. I know that trauma is becoming kind of that word like organic sometimes, that, we just, it becomes a bit vague, but the reality is, as much as we try and define it, it's very personal. And so what one person might define as traumatic, another person might not. And obviously there's big traumas that are, abuse, neglect, there's, disease, like, there's obviously, like, think of war times, or there's significant traumas, adoption, significant traumas, injuries, and then there's small traumas that sometimes get overlooked, whether that be, things like emotional neglect, which is, years and years and years of your needs not emotionally being met. Might not be just one incident. It could be bullying. It could be, interactions with, peers. It's something where our body goes beyond its capacity to cope or deal. And I think that we all have some degree of resilience, but when we experience something where we don't have the playbook, we don't have the capacity to overcome, and again, even when I say that, not everything is traumatic, because it's actually our ability to overcome something that matters. So I'm sure women have had really difficult labors that wouldn't define it as trauma. Why it was traumatic for me is because I didn't have the tools, I didn't have the support, I didn't have the equipment to actually deal with what I was feeling, so my body had to take that on. So where it ends up manifesting later on, and often trauma stems from childhood, because I think we think of children as being extremely resilient, but the reality is they're just really good at kind of swallowing it. And in adulthood, we spend our whole lives dealing with childhood stuff.
Right.
And so I think that, again, why did children succumb to that more so is because they don't have the resources. They don't have the maturity. They don't always have the people around them to say, hey, I see that you're struggling. How should we support you? They may not be getting their emotional needs met. So then they internalize a lot of that, and it may not be something that manifests as a disease right away. It could be, at some point in their life. And it's not always physical symptoms. It could be emotional symptoms like anxiety or depression. But the reality is it's when we can't process something, when we actually can't experience the emotional connection to it, is when the body starts to hang on to that. And when I say hang on to it, it's not conscious, right? So it took a lot for me to understand trauma, like in my own experience. But most of us, we don't actually fully understand how it's affecting us or what that looks like until we really we dig into it. We have to face it. We have to look at it. So, that's a process, right? It's, it's not something, unless we are supported, we even want to do, because it can bring up all sorts of things, right? And so I think, we need to have professionals that are supporting us, a counselor. There's obviously many different tools. I talk about a lot of them in my book, but having the resources to kind of help us through that, because we don't know what we don't know, right?
Yeah.
What I do find is that a lot of times when we look at things as difficult or traumatic or a trigger, right? So like what you might define as being a trigger is different than me. And why? It's because it's based on our life experiences. It's based on what we've been through, our family dynamics, right? And so when I look at, trying to uncover that or see a person's perspective on it, sometimes what ends up happening is, and I'll explain this in a way that might be easier to understand, is that when we don't have a capacity to work through something or deal with something, but our subconscious and unconscious knows that's not good for us. That I don't like to have to feel that insecurity or, that sense of abandonment or rejection. It doesn't feel good to us, right? But we don't know how to deal with it because we're not always consciously aware of it. I do think that unconsciously we will find ourselves in similar circumstances.
Right.
And so we'll keep thinking like, why do I keep going in a scenario where I feel abandoned, where I feel like, somebody's rejecting me? And it'll feel about that immediate circumstance. And if anything, sometimes if we, that self-talk will be, see, this is the way the world is. See, this is what always happens when I put myself out there. I get abandoned or I get rejected. But the reality is it's actually, unconsciously we're attracting that scenario because the body's saying, but we need to heal this. And until we heal this, we're going to keep finding ourselves in this situation. And so often, even in a circumstance that we feel like it's right now, there's connections to something long before. And that's why it's a trigger for us in the first place. And if we heal the initial event, all those other things start to shift and change.
Yeah. As you're talking, I'm just reminded of a time in my life where I suffered with debilitating back pain, and it really was affecting my life severely. I would spend months laid up and I walked with a limp, and but I think what happened during that time was that I really took on that back pain as part of my identity. And so I was like, my back, my back. No, I can't do that. I'll hurt my back. Oh no, I can't sleep there. I'll hurt my back. Oh, my back hurts. My back pain. I have, back issues. And I think like constantly speaking that over myself and accepting that, that I have back pain.
That's your limitation.
And that's my limitation. And it becomes part of my identity. I don't think there was a way at that time that I could have broke free from back pain. And I think one of the things about your story that's so compelling for me is that when you got that diagnosis, you said, no, this is not my story.
No way.
And you wouldn't accept it. And so I think, once I recognized that having back pain was such a part of my identity, and I realized that no, I don't want to live this way anymore. I don't want to be the person with back issues. And, I think at the time I was only 33, and I realized that I had suffered with chronic back pain for 20 years at that point. And I thought, well, what will I look like at 40? What will I look like at 50? Who will I be? And it frightened me. And I thought, no, I don't want to be that. And so it was a combination of things that I did to heal from that. And a lot of it I attribute was to emotional healing. I did a lot of trauma therapy. And I think that I allowed my body to do things like go lift weights, go hiking, that normally I would have said, no, I can't do that because my back. And I just allowed myself to go do that. And I said, I'm fine. My back is okay. And for some people listening, that might be a little bit, they might have a resistance to what I'm saying.
Well, and
what do you think that is?
I think that, well, first of all, I think that a lot of times we think things happen to us, not for us. So the hard part, though, is if we stay in that space, we are disempowered. And until we actually are willing to take responsibility, and I'm not talking about the responsibility of why it happened, because some people it's an injury or it's an accident, or and obviously with trauma, you know, there are victims. I think the hard part, though, is that we think it happened to us, therefore someone else has to take the responsibility. Somebody else has to fix this. But the hard part is that no matter how you got there, it's still your responsibility. No matter if you were, you know, if it was through abuse or hurt or some sort of victimization, it's still your responsibility. And that's a hard one to swallow. And I think until we're ready to step into that, we're always going to be at a disadvantage. Because how do we work through some of the things that we need to work through if we're still in a place of blame and we're still saying, well, there's nothing I can do about it? And so I think that's the difference between, gee, I hope I will heal, and I know I will heal. I knew I would heal. I had no idea how. And just like you, there's a lot of times it's multiple things. It's not just one thing. But being willing to look at every level and being able to do physical things, whether that's, you know, for in your case, exercise, I'm sort of taking different supplements, or, you know, having like therapy done, manual therapy, massage, acupuncture. I mean, there's all sorts of things. Back, by the way, is a lot about support, right? So getting support and help, because if we're, you know, think about structurally what the back does, it supports us, right? So either we're not supporting ourselves or you're wanting support, right? So when I think about that, until we're really willing to take that ownership, it's going to be an obstacle. And I think that sometimes we hang on to our wounds because it gives us an excuse to not have to.
Yeah.
I don't have to participate in life fully.
I think that was what was happening for me. I think that it gave me an excuse to not have to participate, to not have to do the things that were required of me.
Yeah. And that's the irony, right? We're just as afraid of success as we are of failure.
Yeah. I think there's such a level too of fear when we are suffering with whatever kind of ailment, whether physical or mental, emotional. Who will I be without this? What will be required of me if I don't have this back pain or, you know, depression,
limitation,
or this limitation. And I think one of the greatest things that I have been taught, and this was actually my husband that taught me this, was that, you know, I had to picture myself. I had to envision myself, what I would look like as that changed person. And he talks a lot about that around addiction. You know, a lot of people can't imagine what their life would be like without that substance. And I think once you do grasp that vision of who you might be, it might be really scary,
for sure,
first of all.
Yeah.
But when you're able to do that, then you have a mark that you can move towards.
Yeah. Well, because we get really, I often say we get comfortable with the discomfort just because it's familiar. And so when that's all we know and that's all we've known, we settle for that discomfort because we don't know what it could look like without it. So a big part of healing in anything, physically, mentally, emotionally, is like, I have to be able to see myself without this. I have to be able to see what my life could look like and actually let ourselves dream. I mean, that the cliche saying, if we're not dreaming, we're dying. But the truth is, what's happening to us when we are in those limitations is we're not dreaming. We're not looking to the future. We're not looking at, oh, I could do this and I could do that and I could show up this way. And gee, I've always wanted to learn this. We're looking at what I can't do, right? What I'm not able to show up in, what I can't do right now, which means we're then still in that space of not just disempowerment, but, it is a form of dying, right? Because we're not living for what's to come, right? And we're still very much living in the past. So I think it's a critical conversation that probably is one of the hardest ones. I know I've recommended Gabor Mate's book before because he talks about that. And I've had people be very offended. Like, oh, you're saying it's all my fault. And, the reality is yes and no, right? No, it's not your fault consciously, right? Nobody intentionally causes pain or suffering, ever. And nobody deserves pain or suffering. It's not like you karmically deserved it, right? But it's still your responsibility to have to be able to shift it. So, and all of the factors created it, everything, all the experiences, all the exposures, physically, mentally, emotionally, all of those things is accumulation of what's brought you to today. And so the responsibility is saying, what do I have power over? Because not all factors you have power over. So I got to let go of the things I don't have power over. I got to make choices so that I'm moving into a space of more empowerment, but then I actually have to be responsible for the things I do. So what I put in my mouth, what I put on my body, what comes out of my mouth, what I say, how I behave, how I show up in the world, that's my responsibility. I can't control out here.
You're not saying, though, that if someone has like an ache in their wrist, automatically that's related to a trauma.
No, not always. And the easiest way that you can decipher that is if you do healing. Like if, let's say you twist your wrist, right? Or you break your wrist or whatever that is, and you have it casted, and then maybe you take some nutritional support, some calcium and vitamin D and magnesium, and then you go to physiotherapy and you've got good mobility in your wrist and you never have issue again. That was probably just a physical thing, right? It's when it becomes chronic and persistent. Oh, I had that wrist injury, but now ever since then, I still have this chronic pain, and now I've got arthritis in there, and now, I'm getting this numbness in my hand. And again, it's not because, not just because you've injured your wrist, it's because there is a weakness there that's creating that susceptibility. So I think even when there's injury, it manifests in areas that are our weak spots. And why is there weakness? Because maybe there's an emotional connection to that. And if we understand that, then that's how we go in actually addressing things that become more chronic. So I always say when you're looking at healing, I always start with the physical, even in my office. Let's start with the physical things. Because if the physical things are enough to treat something, perfect. Then it was just a physical injury. But if it's not, and if you've been somebody who's like, I'm doing all the right things, I'm eating all the right food, and I'm taking all the right supplements, and I'm, exercising, and I'm getting enough sleep, and I'm still having issues, but you just haven't gone deep enough yet. Okay, so start looking at maybe the energetic levels, then start looking at the emotional level, maybe start looking at the mental levels. There's things I'm not consciously aware of. How do I get into that? What are some different modalities? Talk about all that in the book. I talk about, maybe it's hypnotherapy or EMDR or body talk, or there's so many different therapies out there where I'm getting access to some of those deeper levels that maybe I'm not fully conscious of. I guess in my perspective, I don't give up. So if I know my body's meant to heal, I know God created us that way, then it's a matter of if I haven't got it, I just haven't got there yet. So I just keep looking, keep digging, and always looking at that next level.
Like, don't surrender to the ailment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's also about, in the same way you said, I didn't necessarily know how I would heal. So in the same way, it's not like I can sit here and say, oh, well, every single person, if they just follow what I do, they're going to heal. No, because my journey is specific to me, just like your back pain is specific to you. And people often say that to me, well, you must know how to cure MS now. And I've had people say, oh, you know, that's how you really need to market your book. And I'm like, well, that actually feels really slimy because the reality is my journey is my journey. I know the process of the journey, but it's still unique to you. And so, because that person's story is unique. So I understand how the body heals, but I don't necessarily always know how that's going to manifest for that person. And it's not until you walk through it that people will start to look at their journey as a gift.
What do you say to somebody, though, that, let's say, has cancer and doesn't heal?
Well, we're not immortal.
And you're not saying, like, it's their fault that they didn't do enough work, that they didn't dig deep enough, that they didn't...
No, what I'm saying is if we surrender to the journey, we will always grow and learn. So if a person has cancer and they're like, you know what, I'm going to surrender to this. I'm going to learn what I can. If I look at the body's trying to tell me something and I'm just willing to listen and I'm just going to be curious with that, I can't promise that a person's going to heal from everything. Does the body have capacity? Yes. And I'm never going to be the one that says you're not. But I also know we're not immortal and our body does have a capacity. And I think even like when we think about, well, how do like a child have cancer? How is that fair? How is that their fault? It's not their fault. And I've said that to everyone. It's not your fault, but it's your responsibility. And kids are victims because they are a product of a number of things that have contributed to that. Could be generational patterns that have an affiliation to that. There's a lot of environmental toxins. It's often not just one thing. And I don't know at what point a person steps onto that journey. Is it when they're in stage 4 cancer or when they're in stage 1? Because that would be different too, right? So I'm not selling and saying that, or standing and saying that, you know, just dig deep enough and you'll heal anything.
Yeah.
But I want you to know you can heal. And your individual journey is your individual journey. And when you actually surrender to it, you're not so connected to the outcome. I didn't know I wouldn't have MS. I knew it wouldn't be my story. It wasn't going to define me. But I didn't know if it meant that I would have some issues. I just said, this isn't going to be a limitation for me. So it's sometimes a process where even if we go into that, and there's a workbook I bring to the with the book that people can work through themselves, because it actually is surrendering to the journey without an attachment to the outcome.
I love that.
Because if we attach to the outcome, then we're putting conditions on it. And we're often trying to put it into a box that has to look a certain way, and then we've closed. We're not open to that process. And I can't say what each one of our journeys is supposed to look like on this earth. That's not my decision.
Yeah. I think as a general rule in life, like not being attached to any outcome, I think, you know, holding things loosely, because at the end of the day, I think we don't really know what we're in store for.
Right.
Or what's in store for us. Sorry.
Right. And what we actually have control over, right? Like we have control over ourselves, but there are a lot of factors we don't have control over. And, you know, I think it's always great to have goals, and certainly curing MS was a goal for me. But there needs to always be flexibility, because I think God presents different circumstances, situations. We need to be able to pivot. And I always think that even when I think about a goal, what is the purpose of a goal? It's to create an experience. And if I'm more focused on the experience I'm trying to create, I'm less attached to how it actually has to manifest. Which means I'm more flexible and willing to see the opportunities that show up, the people that show up, the circumstances that show up, rather than me thinking it has to look in this exact way or else, because maybe I get totally off course because I was actually supposed to be over here, but I'm so fixated on it manifesting this way that I've lost all the little opportunities around me that's saying, hey, look here, this is actually where we need to go and the lessons we need to learn.
Yeah, you're actually allowing yourself the experience to live in the moment and be conscious of each thing that comes along that's meant to, because it's an accumulation of the entire journey. I love that.
Yeah.
I think what you're saying too, that that you can heal and that is a possibility. I think perhaps within, just general medicine, that's not a message that people always get. You have this, you're going to have this forever.
Right.
I think what a breath of fresh air that there's something outside of that.
You would,
it's a possibility.
Yes,
It's a possible. You're not saying to people, you will, you're saying it is possible.
Yeah. And that's what our body wants.
Yeah.
You would think that would be an inspiring message. And I would say that is my wholehearted belief. I want to see people free of bondage, free of pain, free of suffering, free to be their authentic, beautiful selves, to experience all that God wants for them on this earth. That's what I want for all people. The irony is that's actually countercultural. When I was asked to do a TED Talk a number of years ago on my story, my book. It was just after I had published my book. And when it came, it was local. I had done the event. It was super exciting. And when it came to be posted online, they actually refused to post it. They were very vague about why they would say they wouldn't. But I think the message of you can heal was a little bit too controversial. And so it took many, many months to fight to get it actually posted, at which it was posted as an advocacy talk versus, a medical conversation. And I wasn't allowed to use my doctor title. So, I would like to think that that's where we're going and that's where we're changing. That's what people want. That's why they're coming into my office. But it is a bit countercultural. Our medical system has very much been in a process of, I won't go through the history of it, but it's a reductionist model, and it's very much, it's disempowering. It's saying, this is happening to you. It's not your fault. There's nothing you can do about it. Just take these things. Why's become popular? It's easy. I don't have to do anything. Great. But how many people also are like, but I don't want to take all these things. I don't want to have hypertension for the rest of my life. I don't want to have to be a diabetic. I don't want to, but there's no conversation around like, what's going on in your life? What's your stress? What traumas? Like, there's no investment in the big picture. And unfortunately, the people that are looking at that, it's expensive, right? You're having to pay out of pocket for all these different practitioners to give them that. And that's the reality. We need a team of people to help us, right? I always think that it's not just one person. I refer to lots of people because I think we all need a team of people that we go to that support us in different ways. The physical remedies, the physician that's, giving us a certain amount of information. Like, it's not a matter of rejecting where our conventional medical system is. There's definitely, it saves lives, right? But it's actually taking that ownership back and saying, okay, if I'm the author and I'm the one that gets to decide what's going on for me, then you people are all working with me, for me, and believing in my healing. If you don't believe in my healing, you're not part of my team.
Healing, I think, or even just wellness in general, is so multifaceted. There's so much to it.
Yeah. And,
even in my own life, I struggled terribly with anxiety, debilitating anxiety for many, many years, and depression. And, I know the things I have to do to keep me well.
Yeah.
And they're not, and it's not just a pill from a doctor. It's not just, supplements, but it's like me participating in my life and being conscious throughout my day. Am I drinking enough water? Am I going to bed at the same time? Am I getting enough sleep? Am I managing my stress? Am I spending time with people that are good for my soul? Am I moving my body? Am I eating good foods? Like I think where perhaps people get misguided is that
it's a one-stop shop.
It's a one-stop shop. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not. It's
And it never had been, I would say, in the past. I think there was a lot more intention and understanding of the holistic system of our bodies. And, somewhere along the way, we've lost that connection. And that might be part of the loss of connection to nature, the loss of connection, like to the earth, to, what we're consuming. I do think there's a real movement of people wanting to be a lot more conscious. There was years of people coming off the farm, and now there's like, oh, I want to go back to the farm. And, growing their own food and just having a sense of like what, that connection to earth, to self, to others. I honestly think what a gift to live today. We are at an unprecedented time where we have, for the most part, our needs met, our basic needs met. That wouldn't have been something we could say throughout history. And we actually have the opportunity to start looking at things on a bigger picture. I think when we talk about trauma, a lot of these things are generational patterns. And I think that one of my basic premises I always look at is everybody's doing the best job they can. And if you can look at the world that way, even in people's worst, that's still their best. And if we can have that understanding and compassion, the reality is that what a gift that we can have people to have conversations. There's books, there's counselors, there's podcasts that are having conversations. Our parents didn't have access to that. My grandparents definitely didn't have access to that. So there wouldn't be conversations about stuff that was going on in the family that was painful, abusive, hurtful. There wouldn't have been tools and resources available. So it just kept perpetuating. So that's where your parents come at it authentically. Their parents come at it authentically, because we're all a product of our upbringing and the environment and the people and the adults around us and the society we lived in. And so, wow, what a gift that we have so much available to us to start really being conscious, not just about like physically how to take care of our body, but emotionally and mentally, that we've really probably never had, at least in recorded history. That is a gift. Like, we can overcome things so quickly now that probably would have taken generations of slowly maybe doing a little better each generation, where now it's like, no, I can get rid of all of that trauma. I'm not carrying that forward with my kids anymore. You can be the black sheep of the family. Where it's like, no, we don't have to carry this wound anymore, the suffering. And to me, that's actually hopeful, right? That's creating a better society, because if we have more healed humans, we are a force to be reckoned with. We're powerful.
Wow, isn't that the truth? That's so well said. And I love this conversation so much that we're going to keep it going.
Yes.
And we're going to go into part 2. So this will be the end of part 1 with Dr. Alana Berg. We just want to say thank you to everybody for listening. And we're going to talk about stress on the body and how you actually can heal. What can you do today for yourself to facilitate healing? So we hope you will join us in part 2, and we will see you soon.